What you're about to hear sounds unbelievable, but every word of it is true. If you love unexpected twists, hit that like button and stay until the end. And when you hear the final reveal, tell me, did you see it coming?
The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed like dying insects above my head, casting a sickly yellow glow over the cracked vinyl booths and sticky linoleum floor. It was nearly midnight on a Tuesday, the kind of shift where minutes dragged like hours and my feet screamed inside my worn sneakers. The smell of burnt coffee and grease hung thick in the air, clinging to my uniform, my hair, my skin, a permanent reminder of where I'd ended up. I wiped down the same table for the third time, my reflection distorted in the window beside it. 24 years old, and I looked older, tired. The kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix. My blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun, loose strands sticking to my sweat-dampened neck, and my green eyes had lost whatever spark they'd once held. I was invisible here, just another girl serving coffee to truckers and insomniacs, counting tips that never quite covered rent. The bell above the door chimed, and I turned reflexively, my practiced smile already in place. But it died on my lips. 2 small boys stood in the doorway, and my heart clenched. They couldn't have been more than 7 and 9 years old, both dark-haired with olive skin that looked gray in the harsh lighting. But it was their eyes that stopped me. Wide, terrified, and ringed with exhaustion. They wore thin jackets that did nothing against the November cold that swept in behind them, and their small bodies trembled violently. "Please," the older one whispered, his voice barely audible. "We're so hungry." I glanced toward the kitchen where my manager Dale was smoking by the back door. He'd made it clear what happened to waitresses who gave away food. I'd seen Lisa fired for it just last month. But these children... The younger boy swayed on his feet, and I moved without thinking, catching him before he collapsed. His skin was ice cold through his jacket, and he weighed almost nothing. Up close, I could see their lips were blue, their fingers raw and cracked from the cold. "Sit down," I whispered, guiding them to the booth farthest from the kitchen. "Quickly." They slid into the worn seats, and I rushed to pour hot chocolate, my hands shaking as I added extra marshmallows. When I set the steaming cups in front of them, they stared at the drinks like they'd seen a miracle. "Drink slowly," I instructed gently, then hurried to the kitchen. Dale was still outside, and the cook had his headphones in, lost in whatever music pumped through his ears. My heart hammered as I grabbed 2 bowls, ladling soup that was destined for the trash anyway, the pot from lunch that we'd kept too long. I added crackers, then impulsively grabbed 2 day-old sandwiches from the cooler. When I returned, the boys were wrapped around their hot chocolate cups like lifelines. I set the food down, and they dove in with a desperation that made my throat tight. They ate like they hadn't seen food in days. And maybe they hadn't. "What are your names?" I asked softly, sliding into the booth across from them. The older boy looked up, soup dripping from his chin. "Marco. This is my brother Luca. I'm Emma," I said. "Where are your parents?" Something flickered across Marco's face. Fear mixed with something harder, something no child should know. "We ran away." "From home?" "From the man who took us." Ice flooded my veins. I glanced at the door, then at the phone behind the counter, but Marco's small hand shot out, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. "Please don't call," he begged, his eyes filling with tears. "They'll find us. He'll find us. And then..." He broke off, shaking his head frantically. Luca had stopped eating, his face pale. "The bad man," he whispered. "He said our papa owed him money. He said we had to pay." My stomach churned. I'd seen enough true crime documentaries, heard enough horror stories. These boys had been taken, held for ransom or worse. And somehow they'd escaped. "Okay," I breathed. "Okay, no police. But we need to get you somewhere safe, somewhere warm." My apartment was barely more than a shoebox, and my roommate wouldn't be happy, but I couldn't send these children back into the freezing night. I couldn't. I waited until Dale went on break, then hustled the boys out through the back entrance, my coat wrapped around both of them. The November air bit through my thin uniform, and I walked fast, one hand on each small shoulder, constantly checking behind us. My apartment building was 6 blocks away, a crumbling structure that sagged like it had given up on life. But it had heat, mostly, and a door that locked. I took the stairs 2 at a time, the boys stumbling after me, and fumbled with my keys. Inside, I got them settled on my lumpy couch, piling every blanket I owned on top of their shivering forms. Luca was asleep within minutes, but Marco watched me with those 2 old eyes. "Why are you helping us?" he asked. I thought about lying, giving him some noble answer, but the truth was simpler and sadder. Because no one helped me when I needed it. I'd been 15 when my parents died, 17 when I aged out of foster care, 20 when I realized no one was coming to save me. These boys deserved better than the hand I'd been dealt. Marco nodded slowly, like he understood more than he should. Then his eyes drifted closed, and soon his breathing evened out. I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen, drinking instant coffee and watching the shadows outside my window, jumping at every sound. At dawn, I'd figure out what to do, find a way to help them that didn't involve whoever they were running from. But as the first gray light of morning crept through my windows, a sound made my blood freeze. A knock at the door. Not the casual knock of a neighbor. This was authoritative, final. The kind of knock that didn't take no for an answer. I moved to the peephole, my heart in my throat. Through the fisheye lens, I could see 3 men. The 2 flanking the door were huge, built like mountains, wearing black suits that screamed money and danger. Security, bodyguards. But it was the man in the center who stole my breath. He stood perfectly still, his hands clasped in front of him. And even through the distorted glass, I could see the power that radiated from him. He wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than 6 months of my rent, tailored so precisely it looked painted on. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Sharp jaw, high cheekbones, and eyes so dark they looked black. Even from here, I could see the coldness in them, the calculation. This was a man who was used to being obeyed, a man who didn't hear the word no. And somehow, I knew. This was the man Marco and Luca had run from, or someone sent by him. The knock came again, harder this time. Behind me, Marco whimpered in his sleep. I pressed my back against the door, my mind racing. I could pretend I wasn't home. Emma Carter. His voice penetrated the door, smooth as silk and cold as winter. "I know you're in there. I know you have something that belongs to me. Open the door, and we can discuss this civilly. My name." He knew my name. How did he know my name? "I have a security feed from the diner," he continued, and I could hear the faint trace of an accent. Italian, maybe. "I've seen what you did. Very noble. Very stupid." Anger flared through my fear. "They're children," I said, my voice shaking. "They're terrified." A pause. Then, "Yes, because their father stole from me. $3 million to be precise." And then he disappeared, leaving his sons as collateral. 3 million. The number echoed in my skull. "So I'll make you an offer, Miss Carter. Open the door, return the boys, and we'll forget this unfortunate incident. You can go back to your life serving coffee and counting pennies. Refuse." Another pause, weighted with threat, and things become complicated. My hands were shaking so badly I had to press them flat against the door. I thought about my empty bank account, my dead-end job, my life that was barely a life at all. I thought about how easy it would be to open this door, hand over 2 children, and pretend none of this had happened. But then I thought about Marco's face when he'd begged me not to call the police. Luca's whispered, "The bad man." "No," I whispered. Silence. Long enough that I thought maybe he'd left. Then, "What did you say?" I forced myself to speak louder, even as my knees shook. "I said no. I'm not giving them to you." Another pause, and I could feel his surprise even through the door, like no one had ever refused him before. Maybe they hadn't. "Miss Carter, I don't think you understand the situation you've put yourself in. I understand that they're children who are scared out of their minds. I understand that whatever their father did, it's not their fault." My voice grew stronger, and I understand that I'm not letting you take them. The silence stretched so long, I thought my heart might give out. Then I heard it. A low sound that might have been a laugh. "Interesting," he murmured. and there was something new in his voice, something I couldn't identify. Very interesting. We'll continue this conversation later, Miss Carter, when you've had time to reconsider. Footsteps retreated down the hallway, unhurried and confident. I stayed pressed against the door until I heard the building's entrance slam shut, then collapsed to the floor, my legs finally giving out. What had I just done? Behind me, Marco stood in the doorway to the living room, his face white. That was him, he whispered. That was Dante Moretti. The name meant nothing to me, but the way Marco said it, with the kind of fear usually reserved for monsters in children's nightmares, told me everything I needed to know. I'd just made an enemy of someone very, very dangerous. And somehow, I knew this was only the beginning. I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. Dale's irritation crackled through the phone line, but I barely heard him. I was too busy watching the street from my window, my fingers gripping the stained curtain so hard my knuckles had gone white. Marco and Luca sat huddled on the couch, picking at the cereal I'd poured for them. Neither had spoken much since I'd told them about the man at the door. Marco just nodded, like he'd expected this, like he'd always known running was futile. What do we do? I asked, hating how helpless I sounded. Marco looked at me with those ancient eyes. You should give us back. He'll hurt you if you don't. I'm not giving you back. He always gets what he wants, the boy insisted. Always. People who say no to Dante Moretti. He drew his finger across his throat. I swallowed hard. There has to be someone we can call, someone who can help. But even as I said it, I knew it was useless. If this Moretti was powerful enough to kidnap children for their father's debts, he was powerful enough to have connections everywhere. Police, judges, social services, people who would hand these boys right back to him. The knock came at 10 in the morning, different from the dawn knock. This one was softer, almost polite. But it froze my blood just the same. Through the peephole I saw a woman this time, elegant, older, wearing a burgundy coat and pearls. She smiled at the door like she could see me through it. Miss Carter, my name is Sophia. Mr. Moretti sent me to speak with you, woman to woman. Her voice was kind, maternal even. Please, just a conversation. Every instinct screamed at me not to open the door, but something about her felt different from the men this morning, less threatening. Or maybe that was exactly what I was supposed to think. I cracked the door open, keeping the chain latched. Up close, Sophia was beautiful in the way expensive things are beautiful. Polished, maintained, perfect. Her dark hair was swept into a chignon, and her brown eyes assessed me with unsettling precision. You're very brave, she said. Or very foolish. I haven't decided which. What do you want? To help you understand what you've involved yourself in. She glanced past me, and I knew she could see the boys. May I come in? I promise. No one is here to hurt you. Not today. The not today made my stomach clench, but I found myself unhooking the chain. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the desperate hope that there was a way out of this that didn't end with everyone hurt. Sophia entered like she owned the space, her heels clicking on my cheap linoleum. She looked around my apartment, the peeling wallpaper, the secondhand furniture, the water stain on the ceiling, and something flickered across her face. Pity? Calculation. Boys, she said gently to Marco and Luca, would you go into the bedroom for a moment? The adults need to talk. They looked at me and I nodded. Once the door clicked shut, Sophia turned to me with an expression that was almost sympathetic. Sit down, Kara, before you fall down. I realized I was swaying on my feet and sank into the kitchen chair. Sophia remained standing, studying me like I was a puzzle she was trying to solve. Do you know who Dante Moretti is? She asked. Marco said the name, that's all. Dante is the head of the Moretti family, one of the most powerful organizations on the East Coast. Shipping, real estate, construction. All legitimate, of course. Her smile was thin. On paper. My mouth went dry. He's Mafia. Such an ugly word, but yes. And the boy's father, Antonio Caruso, worked for him. Handled money. $3 million vanished from an account Antonio controlled, and then Antonio vanished with it. Sophia's eyes hardened. In our world, Miss Carter, there are rules. When someone steals, they pay. When they can't pay, their family pays. Their children. Their leverage. Antonio loves those boys. Dante was certain that taking them would bring Antonio out of hiding. She paused. But you've complicated things. Good. Sophia laughed, a genuine sound that surprised me. You really have no idea what you've done, do you? Dante Moretti has never been refused. Not by politicians, not by rival families, certainly not by a waitress in a diner. She leaned closer. He's obsessed now. You've become interesting to him, and that's the most dangerous thing you can be. My hands were shaking again. I pressed them flat against the table. I don't care. I'm not handing over 2 terrified children. Even if it costs you everything? Sophia's voice was soft. Your job, your home, your safety, Dante won't stop. He'll dismantle your life piece by piece until you have nothing left but the choice to give him what he wants. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I blinked them back. Then I guess I'll have nothing. Sophia stared at me for a long moment, then did something unexpected. She smiled. Really smiled. He's going to eat you alive, she murmured. But there was something almost approving in her tone. But perhaps there's another way. What do you mean? Dante is many things, dangerous, ruthless, unforgiving, but he follows a code, rules that even he doesn't break. She sat down across from me, and I caught the scent of her perfume. Something expensive and floral. What if I could offer you protection? For you and the boys, hope flared in my chest. How? Marry him. The words hung in the air like smoke. I must have heard wrong. What? Marry Dante. Become his wife. Sophia's expression was serious now. In our world, family is sacred. A wife cannot be touched, cannot be harmed. The boys would be under your protection, and by extension, his. Even he couldn't hurt them without disrespecting his own marriage. I laughed. A hysterical sound. You're insane. Why would he possibly agree to that? Because I know my nephew, Sophia said quietly. He's intrigued by you. Your defiance. Your courage. Most people cower before him, but you slammed a door in his face. She leaned back. And Dante has been alone for a long time. His parents want him settled, want heirs. They've been pushing for an advantageous marriage. You could be that. I'm a waitress with nothing. Exactly. You have nothing to gain from him except protection. No agenda, no family connections trying to use the marriage for power. You'd be clean, simple. Sophia's eyes glinted. And you'd be a curiosity, the girl brave enough or stupid enough to say no to Dante Moretti. My head was spinning. This is insane. This is survival. Sophia stood, smoothing her coat. I'll present the offer to him. If he agrees, someone will come for you this evening. You'll have dinner with him. A chance to negotiate terms. And if I refuse? Sophia's expression softened with something like regret. Then the boys go back to the safe house and you... Well, Dante doesn't forgive easily, or ever. She moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. If you do this, if you marry him, it won't be temporary. Divorce isn't an option in our world. You'll be his wife in every sense, bound to him, owned by him. She looked back at me. So, think carefully about whether 2 children you just met are worth your entire life. The door closed behind her with a soft click. I sat frozen at my kitchen table, my mind refusing to process what had just happened. Marriage. To a mafia boss. To a man who terrified me, who'd kidnapped children, who probably had blood on his hands. But those children were in my bedroom, trusting me to protect them. The afternoon crawled by in agonizing slowness. I tried to think of alternatives, of someone I could call, somewhere I could run. But Sophia was right. I had nothing. No money for a lawyer, no connections to powerful people, nowhere to hide that Moretti couldn't find me. At 6 o'clock, the knock came again. This time, one of the huge men from this morning stood in the hallway, his expression neutral. Miss Carter, Mr. Moretti requests your presence for dinner. A car is waiting. My legs felt like water as I stood. I turned to Marco and Luca, who'd been silent all day, listening to everything. Stay here, I told them. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. Marco grabbed my hand. Don't go. Please, he's dangerous. I know. I knelt down, meeting his eyes. But this might be the only way to keep you safe. Both of you. In the hallway, the bodyguard, if that's what he was, led me downstairs to a black SUV with tinted windows. The interior smelled like leather and money, and I felt completely out of place in my jeans and secondhand sweater. We drove through the city as twilight fell, the streetlights flickering to life. I watched my neighborhood disappear, replaced by increasingly upscale areas, until we pulled up to a restaurant I'd only seen in magazines. The kind where reservations required a 2-month wait and a second mortgage. The bodyguard opened my door. Mr. Moretti is waiting inside. My heart hammered as I walked through the entrance. The maitre d' took one look at me and somehow knew exactly where I was going, leading me through the elegant dining room to a private area in the back. And there he was. Dante Moretti sat at a table set for 2, a glass of red wine in his hand. In the warm lighting, he was even more striking than he'd been in my hallway. Dark eyes that missed nothing, sharp features softened slightly by the candlelight, broad shoulders that filled his black suit perfectly. He stood as I approached, a gesture of politeness that seemed incongruous with everything I knew about him. Miss Carter. His voice was the same as through the door, smooth, cultured, with that faint accent that made my name sound exotic. Thank you for joining me, like I'd had a choice. He pulled out my chair, and I sat because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. Up close, I caught his scent, something expensive and masculine, cedar and spice, mixed with the faint smell of cigarette smoke. You're afraid, he observed, settling back into his own seat. Good. Fear means you're not stupid. I forced myself to meet his eyes. They were darker than I'd thought, almost black, and completely unreadable. This was a man who revealed nothing he didn't want to reveal. Your aunt came to see me, I said, proud that my voice didn't shake. Sophia has a talent for negotiation. He sipped his wine, studying me over the rim of the glass. She tells me you're considering her proposal. She told me I don't have a choice. Everyone has choices, Miss Carter. The question is whether you can live with the consequences. He set down his glass. You chose to shelter my property. You chose to refuse my very reasonable request. Now you're choosing whether to become my wife or face the alternative. The word property made my stomach turn, but I kept my expression neutral. Why would you possibly want to marry me? You don't know me. I know enough. He leaned back, and the candlelight cast shadows across his face, making him look even more dangerous. You're brave, selfless, loyal to people you have no obligation to protect. These are rare qualities. His eyes locked on mine. And you said no to me. Do you have any idea how rare that is? So this is what? A novelty? A game? Something flickered across his face, annoyance or maybe respect. This is business. I need a wife. You need protection. We can help each other. And the boys? Would be yours. Under your care. Untouchable. He paused. Though their father still owes me $3 million. That debt doesn't disappear. My hands clenched in my lap. What are the terms? Dante smiled, slow and predatory. Smart girl. Always negotiate. He signaled a waiter who appeared with menus, but I couldn't focus on food. The terms are simple. You marry me. You live in my home, attend my events, play the role of Dante Moretti's wife in every public sense. In return, you and the boys are protected. No one touches you. No one harms them. And privately, his smile widened. That's negotiable, but understand, Kara, this will be a real marriage. I won't tolerate disrespect or disloyalty. You'll belong to me. The possessiveness in his voice should have terrified me. It did terrify me, but there was something else there too. Something I couldn't name. I want it in writing, I heard myself say. The protection for Marco and Luca. Guaranteed. Dante's eyebrows rose slightly. You trust a contract more than my word? I don't know you well enough to trust anything. He laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face for just a moment. Fair enough. You'll have your contract. He leaned forward, and I caught that scent again. intoxicating and dangerous. But know this, Emma Carter. Once you're mine, you're mine. There's no going back, no escape, no divorce. You'll wake up next to me every day for the rest of your life. His words wrapped around me like chains. Beautiful and terrible. When do you need an answer? I whispered. Now. The single word hung between us, heavy with finality. I thought about my empty apartment, my dead-end life, the two boys who'd looked at me with desperate hope. I thought about having nothing left to lose. Yes, I breathed. I'll marry you. Dante's smile was victorious and terrifying all at once. Excellent, he murmured. We'll wed tomorrow. Tomorrow. I'll have everything arranged. The word echoed in my head as a waiter appeared with plates of food I couldn't taste. Tomorrow I'd become the wife of a Mafia boss. Tomorrow my life would change forever. Dante raised his wine glass to my future bride. I picked up my own glass with shaking hands, and as our glasses touched, I saw something flicker in his dark eyes. Possession, satisfaction, and something that looked almost like hunger. The wedding happened so fast I barely had time to process it. 24 hours after I'd said yes to Dante Moretti, I stood in a private room at City Hall wearing a cream-colored dress that cost more than I'd earned in 6 months. Sophia had appeared at my apartment at dawn with a team of people, a hairstylist, makeup artist, and a woman who'd taken my measurements with clinical efficiency before returning an hour later with 3 dresses to choose from. I'd picked the simplest one, though simple was relative when the fabric was pure silk, and the bodice was hand-embroidered with delicate pearls. It fell to my knees, elegant and understated, making me look like someone I didn't recognize. Marco and Luca sat on a bench against the wall, wearing new clothes too, button-down shirts and dress pants that made them look like different children. They'd been quiet all morning, watching everything with wide, uncertain eyes. "You don't have to do this," Marco had whispered while Sophia was adjusting my hair. "We can run. All of us." But we both knew that was a fantasy. There was nowhere to run that Dante wouldn't find us. The door opened, and my breath caught. Dante entered wearing a charcoal suit that looked like it had been crafted specifically for his body. Every line perfect, every detail precise. His dark hair was swept back, and those black eyes found mine immediately, pinning me in place. Behind him came 2 men, one older, silver-haired and dignified, the other younger, maybe Dante's age, with the same sharp features but lighter eyes. Family, I realized, witnesses. Emma. Dante's voice was soft, but it carried complete authority. He crossed to me, and I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. "You look beautiful." It should have been a compliment. Instead, it felt like he was cataloging his acquisition. He took my hand. His was warm, calloused in a way that surprised me, and led me to where a judge waited, an older woman with kind eyes that didn't match the speed and efficiency of the ceremony. The words blurred together. I heard myself say "I do" when prompted, heard Dante's deep voice echo the same words. A ring appeared on my finger, a simple platinum band that felt heavy as a shackle. Dante wore a matching one, and something about seeing it on his hand made this feel suddenly, terrifyingly real. "You may kiss your bride." Dante's hand came up to cup my jaw, tilting my face toward his. His touch was surprisingly gentle, but there was no mistaking the possession in it. He leaned down, and I closed my eyes instinctively. His lips met mine, soft at first, then firmer, claiming. The kiss lasted only seconds, but I felt it everywhere. A brand, a promise, a warning. When he pulled back, his thumb brushed across my cheekbone, and his eyes held something dark and satisfied. "Mine," he murmured, so quietly only I could hear. Papers were signed. The older man, Dante's father, I learned, clapped him on the shoulder with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The younger man, his brother Nico, studied me with open curiosity, and just like that, I was Emma Moretti. The name felt foreign, like a costume that didn't fit. Dante's hand settled on the small of my back as he guided me out to the waiting SUV. Marco and Luca climbed in ahead of us, and I slid into the leather seat, hyper-aware of Dante beside me, his thigh pressed against mine in the confined space. "Where are we going?" I asked as the vehicle pulled away from City Hall. Home. He didn't look at me, instead checking his phone, his fingers moving efficiently across the screen. Your things have already been moved, my things. The few boxes of belongings I owned were probably already lost in whatever mansion he called home. We drove for 30 minutes, leaving the city behind for an area of sprawling estates hidden behind tall gates and manicured hedges. When we finally turned through a set of iron gates, my breath caught. The house, no, estate, rose before us like something from a movie. 3 stories of cream-colored stone, with tall windows that gleamed in the late afternoon sun, surrounded by perfectly maintained grounds that seemed to stretch forever. This is where you live? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Dante glanced at me, and I saw amusement flicker across his face. This is where we live now. You're the lady of this house, Emma. You should get used to it. The SUV stopped in front of a grand entrance where staff waited. Actual staff, in uniforms, standing at attention. I felt Marco press closer to me as we climbed out, and I took his hand instinctively. A woman stepped forward, older, with steel-gray hair and a no-nonsense expression. Welcome home, Mr. Moretti, Mrs. Moretti. She nodded to me, and hearing that title made my stomach flip. I'm Mrs. Chen, the head housekeeper. If you need anything, you need only ask. Thank you, I managed. Dante's hand returned to my back, that possessive touch that seemed to be his default. Mrs. Chen will show you and the boys to your rooms. I have business to attend to. He leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. We'll have dinner at 8. Formal dining room. Don't be late. Then he was gone, striding into the house with 2 of his men flanking him, already on his phone, already back to whatever dangerous business consumed his days. Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly as she looked at me. Come, I'll give you the tour. The house was a maze of elegant rooms, each more beautiful than the last. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, artwork that probably cost more than my entire life savings. Mrs. Chen pointed out the library, the formal dining room, the sitting rooms, plural, and a dozen other spaces I knew I'd get lost trying to find again. Finally, she led us upstairs to a hallway, lined with doors. The boys' rooms, she said, opening 2 adjacent doors to reveal spaces that made my throat tight. Each room was huge, with a proper bed, desk, shelves, and toys already arranged. Someone had thought ahead, had known these children were coming. Marco and Luca stood frozen in the doorway of the first room, like they were afraid to enter. Go ahead, I encouraged softly. It's yours. They moved slowly, touching things with hesitant fingers, and I saw tears slide down Luca's face. When was the last time they'd had a real room? A real home? Mrs. Chen touched my arm gently. Your suite is this way, my suite. The words should have been exciting. Instead, dread pooled in my stomach. She opened a set of double doors at the end of the hall, and I stepped into what could only be described as luxury. The sitting area alone was bigger than my entire apartment had been, decorated in soft creams and golds. Through another doorway, I could see a bedroom with a massive 4-poster bed, and beyond that, a bathroom with a tub that looked deep enough to swim in. Your things are in the closet, Mrs. Chen said, though I imagine you'll want to do some shopping. Mr. Moretti has arranged for an account. She paused at the door. Dinner is at 8. Someone will come to escort you down. Do you need anything else? I shook my head, unable to speak. When she left, I sank onto the edge of the bed and finally let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. Terror. Disbelief. A surreal sense that this was happening to someone else. I'd married a stranger, a dangerous, powerful stranger who now owned me in every legal sense. The door opened without warning, and I jumped to my feet. Dante stood in the doorway, having shed his jacket and loosened his tie. He looked less formal now, but no less intimidating. His eyes swept over me, taking in my position on the bed, and something flickered across his face. Settling in? He asked, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. The click of the lock made my pulse spike. The boys, they need me, I said quickly. They're scared in a new place. The boys are fine. Mrs. Chen is with them. He moved closer, and I had to fight the urge to back away. We need to discuss expectations. Expectations? He stopped a few feet away, studying me with those dark, unreadable eyes. You're my wife now, Emma. That comes with certain responsibilities. My mouth went dry. The contract protects the boys, makes sure no harm comes to them. His voice was soft but firm. But it doesn't change what you are to me, what you agreed to become. I agreed to marry you, to play the part in public, and in private. He took another step forward, and now I could smell that scent again. Cedar and spice and danger. Do you think I'd settle for a wife in name only? Fear and something else, something I didn't want to examine, coiled in my stomach. I don't know you. Then get to know me. His hand came up, fingers trailing along my jaw the same way they had during our kiss. His touch was gentle, but there was steel beneath it. I'm not a patient man, Emma, but I'm not a monster. I won't force you. His thumb brushed my lower lip, and my breath hitched. But I will have you. Eventually. Willingly. You'll come to me because you want to, not because you have to. The arrogance in his words should have made me angry. Instead, I felt heat flood my cheeks. And if I don't? I challenged, my voice barely a whisper. His smile was slow and devastating. You will. I'm very persuasive. He leaned closer, his lips nearly touching my ear. And whether you want to admit it or not, you're already drawn to me. I felt it in your kiss, the way your body responds to mine. You're delusional. He laughed, a low, rich sound that vibrated through me. We'll see. He stepped back, giving me space, though his eyes remained locked on mine. Dinner at 8. Wear something nice. We have guests tonight. My parents want to meet their new daughter-in-law. Tonight? But Welcome to my world, Kara. Everything moves fast. You'll adjust. He moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Emma? The boys are safe here. No one will touch them. But they're your responsibility. Their behavior reflects on you. And by extension, on me. Make sure they understand that. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in a room that smelled like him, my heart racing and my mind spinning. I had 3 hours to prepare to meet his family. 3 hours to figure out how to play the role of Mafia wife. 3 hours to reconcile the fact that I'd just sold myself to a man who looked at me like I was something to be conquered. I checked on Marco and Luca. They were in Marco's room, exploring cautiously, before returning to my suite. In the massive closet, I found my few pieces of clothing hanging alongside dozens of new items, all in my size, all expensive and beautiful. I chose a simple black dress because it seemed safe, then stared at myself in the mirror. I looked like a stranger. Hair styled, makeup perfect, dress that cost more than a month's rent. Emma Moretti stared back at me with frightened green eyes. At exactly 8, a young woman knocked on my door to escort me down. The formal dining room was breathtaking. A long mahogany table set with crystal and china, lit by an enormous chandelier, and there he was, standing at the head of the table, now in a fresh suit, looking every inch the powerful man he was. His eyes found mine immediately, and he moved toward me with predatory grace. Stunning, he murmured, taking my hand and bringing it to his lips. The gesture was old-fashioned, romantic even, but his eyes held that now familiar possession. Come, meet the family. His parents were exactly what I expected. His father, Lorenzo, radiating quiet power in an expensive suit. His mother, Valentina, elegant and cold, studying me like I was a curiosity. Nico was there too, along with Sophia, who gave me an encouraging smile. I sat beside Dante, hyper-aware of his thigh pressed against mine under the table, his hand occasionally settling on my knee, a possessive gesture that made everyone aware I belonged to him. Valentina asked pointed questions about my background, where I grew up, my family, my education. Each answer seemed to disappoint her more. I was nobody. Nothing, a waitress her son had inexplicably married. And the children? Lorenzo asked, cutting into his steak with precision. The Caruso boys. They're here. Under Emma's care, Dante said smoothly. She's taken responsibility for them. Generous, Valentina murmured, though her tone suggested she thought it was anything but. Though I hope you understand, dear, that children require structure, discipline. Perhaps a boarding school. No. The word came out sharper than I intended, and silence fell over the table. Dante's hand tightened on my knee, but when I glanced at him, I saw something that might have been approval in his eyes. Emma has made her position clear, he said calmly. The boys stay with her. That's final. Valentina's lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded. No one argued with Dante, not even his mother. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of courses I barely tasted and conversation I struggled to follow, talk of business deals and political connections, of rivalries and alliances, all in careful code that I only half understood. By the time dessert arrived, exhaustion was pulling at me. It had been less than 48 hours since I'd sheltered 2 freezing boys in my diner, and now I was married to a Mafia boss, living in a mansion, sitting at a table with people who could probably have me killed with a phone call. When dinner finally ended, Dante walked me back upstairs, his hand on the small of my back, silent. At my door, he stopped, turning me to face him. You did well tonight, he said. My mother is difficult. You handled her. I don't know what I'm doing, I admitted. I know. His hand came up to cut my face, thumb stroking my cheek. But you'll learn. And I'll teach you. He leaned down, his lips brushing my temple. Get some rest, Mowgli Mia. Tomorrow, you start learning what it means to be mine. He left me there, trembling, his scent lingering on my skin. Inside my suite, I changed into one of the silk nightgowns someone had left in my dresser and climbed into the massive bed. The sheets were cool and expensive against my skin, and the room was silent except for the distant sound of the city. I should have felt safe, protected. Instead, I felt trapped in a golden cage with a man who looked at me like I was something to be owned. And the terrifying part was the small voice inside me that wondered what it would feel like to surrender. The next 2 weeks passed in a disorienting blur of lessons and adjustments. Sophia became my constant companion, teaching me everything I needed to know about being Dante Moretti's wife, how to dress for different occasions. Casual family dinners required elegant simplicity. Charity events demanded designer gowns. Business meetings called for sophisticated power dressing. How to speak. Never volunteer information, never discuss Dante's business. Smile and deflect personal questions. How to behave. Always defer to Dante in public. Never contradict him in front of others. Understand that his word was law. You're a reflection of him now, Sophia explained one afternoon, as we sat in the sunroom, going through my new wardrobe. Everything you do, everything you say, it all reflects on Dante. His enemies will look for weaknesses. His rivals will try to use you. You must be perfect. Perfect. The word haunted me. Marco and Luca were adjusting better than I was. They had a tutor now, a kind older man named Mr. Gallo, who came every morning to teach them. They ate regular meals, slept in warm beds, and slowly, the terror was leaving their eyes. Marco still watched everything carefully, still flinched at loud noises, but Luca had started to smile, actually smile. That alone made everything worth it. But Dante was everywhere and nowhere. He left before dawn most mornings, his side of the bed. Our bed, I had to keep reminding myself, already cold when I woke. Yes. After the 3rd night, he'd simply appeared in my room at midnight, informed me that separate bedrooms sent the wrong message to the household, and proceeded to claim his space beside me. He didn't touch me beyond the occasional brush of his hand, but sleeping next to him was its own form of torture. I was hyper-aware of every breath, every movement, the heat radiating from his body just inches away. He'd return for dinner most nights, always impeccably dressed, always with that commanding presence that made everyone snap to attention. He'd ask about my day, listen with apparent interest to my halting descriptions of lessons with Sophia, then retreat to his office for hours of phone calls in Italian that I couldn't understand. But there were moments, brief, unsettling moments, when I'd catch him watching me. His dark eyes would track my movements across a room, follow the curve of my neck when I turned my head, linger on my lips when I spoke. The intensity of his gaze made my skin flush and my pulse race. He was waiting, biding his time. A predator studying his prey. 2 weeks after our wedding, everything changed. I was in the library with Marco and Luca, reading to them, something I'd started doing every afternoon. When Dante appeared in the doorway, he usually didn't come home until evening, and seeing him in the middle of the day, still in his suit, but with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up, made my breath catch. "Boys," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "Mrs. Chen needs help in the kitchen. She's making cookies." It was clearly a dismissal. Marco looked at me, and I nodded. They scampered off, leaving me alone with my husband. Dante closed the door and leaned against it, studying me with an expression I couldn't read. "We need to talk." My stomach dropped. "About what?" "Antonio Caruso has made contact." The room seemed to tilt. "The boy's father? He wants to negotiate. For his sons." Dante pushed off the door, moving toward me with that controlled grace. "He's offered half the money back, $1.5 million, in exchange for Marco and Luca." Ice flooded my veins. "No." "That wasn't a question, Emma. I'm telling you what's happening." He stopped in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. "Antonio will meet me tomorrow night. A neutral location. He'll bring the money, and we'll discuss terms." "There are no terms. The boys stay here. With me." My voice shook, but held firm. That was the agreement. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or respect. The agreement was that they'd be under your protection. And they are. But Antonio is their father, Emma. He has rights. He abandoned them. He used them as collateral. I stood, my hands clenched into fists. You saw how terrified they were. "You think Marco wants to go back to a man who gambled with their lives? What I think doesn't matter. In our world, your world is wrong." The words exploded out of me, months of fear and frustration finally breaking free. "Your world treats children like property, like bargaining chips. Marco is 9 years old, Dante, 9. And he's already seen things no child should see. If you send him back..." Dante's hand shot out, gripping my wrist, not painfully, but firmly enough to stop my tirade. His eyes had gone dark, dangerous. "Careful, Mowgli Mia. You're speaking of things you don't understand." "Then help me understand." I jerked against his hold, but he didn't let go. "Tell me why a father's rights matter more than his son's safety. Tell me why money is worth more than 2 little boys who are finally starting to feel safe." For a long moment, we stood locked together, his hand around my wrist, my chest heaving with emotion. Then, slowly, his grip loosened. His thumb brushed across my pulse point, feeling the frantic beat of my heart. "You really care about them," he murmured. And there was something in his voice I hadn't heard before. Something almost soft. "Of course I care about them. They're children. You barely knew them. You threw away your entire life for 2 boys you'd just met." His free hand came up to cut my face, and I froze at the gentleness of the touch. "Do you have any idea how rare that is? How extraordinary?" "It's not extraordinary. It's basic human decency," he laughed. A low sound that seemed to vibrate through me. "In my world, Kara, there's no such thing as basic human decency. There's only power and loyalty and survival." His thumb traced my cheekbone. "But you're different. You operate on some other system I don't quite understand." "Then let them stay," I whispered. "Please. Don't make me watch them go back to someone who failed to protect them." Dante stared at me for so long I thought he might refuse. Then slowly he nodded. "I'll talk to Antonio, see if we can reach an alternative arrangement." Relief flooded through me so intensely my knees went weak. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Antonio may not agree." His hand was still on my face, his eyes searching mine. "And Emma? What you just did, challenging me, arguing with me about my decisions. Most people wouldn't dare. Are you angry?" His smile was slow and devastating. "I'm fascinated." He leaned closer, his breath warm against my lips. "You're not afraid of me. You should be, but you're not. Why?" "I am afraid of you," I admitted. "But I'm more afraid of failing those boys." Something shifted in his expression, something heated and possessive. "Dio, you're going to ruin me," he murmured. Then his lips were on mine. This kiss was nothing like our wedding kiss. This was hungry, demanding, claiming, his hand fisted in my hair, tilting my head back. and I gasped against his mouth. He took advantage, deepening the kiss, his tongue sliding against mine in a way that made heat pool low in my belly. I should have pushed him away, should have remembered that this was an arrangement, a business deal. But my hands were fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. And when he groaned low in his throat, I felt an answering heat flood through me. He pulled back abruptly, his breathing harsh, his eyes blazing. I need to go, before I forget every promise I made about giving you time. His thumb brushed across my swollen lips. But soon, Emma. Soon you'll come to me, and when you do, I won't be gentle. He left me standing in the library, trembling, my lips burning from his kiss, my body aching in ways I didn't want to examine. That night, Dante didn't come to bed until late. I lay in the darkness, pretending to sleep, feeling the mattress dip as he climbed in beside me. He didn't touch me, but I could feel the heat of him, smell that cedar and spice scent that was becoming dangerously familiar. "I know you're awake," he murmured into the darkness. I didn't respond. I spoke to Antonio. "He's agreed to meet without preconditions. We'll see what he wants beyond money and his sons." A pause. I told him the boys are settled here, that removing them would be problematic. I turned over to face him, though I could barely see him in the darkness. Will he agree? I don't know. Antonio is desperate, which makes him dangerous, but he loves his sons. That I believe. The bed shifted, and then his hand found mine under the covers, his fingers lacing through mine. "Whatever happens tomorrow, the boys won't leave without your consent. I give you my word." "Why?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. "Why does what I want matter to you?" Silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken things. Then, "Because you're mine, and I protect what's mine." His thumb stroked across my knuckles. "Get some rest, Kara. Tomorrow will be difficult." The next day crept by with agonizing slowness. Dante left early, and Sophia arrived mid-morning with a dress bag. "For tonight," she explained. "Dante wants you at the meeting." "What? Why?" "Because Antonio asked to see the woman who's been caring for his sons. And because Dante wants to show you off." She smiled slightly. "You're his secret weapon, though he'd never admit it. Antonio won't expect Dante Moretti to have a wife who actually cares about the children's welfare." The dress was deep emerald green, elegant and form-fitting. Sophia helped me into it, then worked on my hair and makeup until I looked polished and sophisticated. Everything I wasn't. At 7, Dante appeared in our room, devastating in a black suit. His eyes swept over me, and something dark and possessive flashed across his face. "Perfect," he murmured, crossing to me. He pulled a long jewelry box from his pocket. "Wear this." Inside was a necklace, a stunning emerald pendant surrounded by diamonds on a delicate platinum chain. It probably cost more than I'd earn in several lifetimes. He fastened it around my neck himself, his fingers brushing my nape in a touch that felt intentional. In the mirror, we looked like a matched set, powerful, wealthy, untouchable. "Remember," he said softly, his eyes meeting mine in the reflection. "In front of Antonio, you're my wife, my partner. Whatever I say, you support." "Understood," I nodded, my throat tight. The meeting was at a restaurant, not the elegant place where we'd had dinner, but something more discreet, with private rooms and security that was visible but not obvious. Dante's hand stayed on my back as we walked through, his men flanking us. Antonio Caruso was already waiting in a private room, and I sucked in a breath. He looked like his sons, the same dark hair, same olive skin, but where Marco and Luca were soft with youth, Antonio was hard with desperation. His eyes were sunken, his movements twitchy. A man at the end of his rope. Those eyes found me immediately, widening. "You're her, the waitress." "I'm Emma Moretti," I corrected, proud of how steady my voice was. "Your sons are safe, happy, they're being cared for. They belong with me." But there was no conviction in his voice, only grief. Dante guided me to a chair, then sat beside me, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. "You stole from me, Antonio, $3 million. That's not the kind of debt that goes away." I know. Antonio ran his hands through his hair. "I was desperate. My wife, She needed surgery, experimental treatment not covered by insurance. I thought I could borrow it, pay it back before anyone noticed. You thought wrong. Please. Antonio's voice broke. I have half. 1.5 million. Take it. Take all of it. Just let me see my boys. Let me know they're okay. Dante leaned back, his hand finding my thigh under the table. A possessive, grounding touch. The boys can stay where they are, under Emma's care. You'll see them once a month, supervised, and you'll work off the remaining debt. Work it off how? You're good with numbers. I have businesses that need auditing. Legitimate businesses, Dante added. You'll work for me. 5 years. At the end, your debt is clear, and we can discuss custody arrangements. Antonio's face crumpled with relief and despair. 5 years? Or I can take the money and you never see Marco and Luca again. Your choice. I squeezed Dante's hand under the table, and he glanced at me. I saw the question in his eyes and nodded slightly. They can visit you too, I heard myself say. Once a month. At your place. If it's safe. They should know their father. Antonio's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you. The rest of the meeting was details. Arrangements, schedules, payment plans. Through it all, Dante's hand stayed on my thigh, a constant reminder that I was his, that we were in this together. When we finally left, the night air was cool against my flushed skin. In the car, Dante pulled me against him, his arm around my shoulders. You surprise me, he murmured against my hair, offering visitation. That was generous. They need their father, even if he made mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, Kara. The question is whether they survive them. His hand tilted my face toward his. You're turning out to be exactly what I needed. Even if I didn't know I needed it. His kiss was softer this time, but no less possessive. And when his hand slid up my thigh, bunching the fabric of my dress, I didn't stop him. The drive home felt endless. Every touch, every heated look, built tension between us until the air felt thick with it. When we finally arrived, Dante dismissed his men with a gesture, then turned to me with eyes that promised everything. Upstairs, he commanded softly. Now. And for the first time, I went willingly. The bedroom felt different tonight, charged with an energy that made my skin hypersensitive and my breath shallow. Dante closed the door behind us with a quiet click that sounded like finality, like a decision made. He shrugged off his jacket, tossing it over a chair, then turned to face me. The lamplight cast shadows across his face, making him look even more dangerous, more compelling. His eyes never left mine as he slowly unknotted his tie, pulling it free with deliberate precision. Are you afraid? He asked, his voice low and rough. I should have been. Everything about this moment should have terrified me. The predatory way he moved, the heat in his dark eyes, the fact that I barely knew this man who now had every legal right to me. But instead of fear, I felt something else entirely. Something that had been building since that first kiss in the library, growing stronger with every heated look, every possessive touch. No, I whispered. Not of you. Something fierce and triumphant flashed across his face. He crossed to me in 3 strides, his hands framing my face with surprising gentleness, even as his eyes burned with barely restrained hunger. I've been patient, he murmured, his thumb tracing my lower lip, waiting for you to come to me willingly. But Dio Emma, you test my control every day. The way you care for those boys, the way you stood up to me, to my mother, to Antonio, the way you look at me when you think I'm not watching. How do I look at you? My voice came out breathier than I intended. His smile was slow and devastating. Like you want me as much as I want you. Like you're finally ready to stop fighting this. He was right. Somewhere between the wedding and tonight, between his unexpected kindness to Marco and Luca and the way he'd held my hand in the darkness, I'd stopped seeing him as just a dangerous stranger. I'd started seeing the man beneath the power, the one who kept his promises, who listened when I spoke, who looked at me like I was something precious and rare. I don't know what I'm doing, I admitted, my hands settling on his chest. I could feel his heart beating hard and fast beneath the expensive fabric of his shirt. Then let me show you. His lips brushed mine, soft at first, questioning. When I didn't pull away, he deepened the kiss, one hand sliding into my hair, while the other found the zipper of my dress. The fabric pooled at my feet, leaving me exposed in nothing but lace underwear and the emerald necklace. Dante's eyes darkened as they traced every curve, every line of my body, and I felt beautiful under his gaze. Desired in a way I'd never experienced before. Perfetta, he breathed. Then his mouth was on mine again, demanding and possessive. While his hands explored with a reverence that made my knees weak, he lifted me easily, laying me on the massive bed that had felt so empty these past 2 weeks. The cool sheets contrasted with the heat of his body as he covered me, his weight both grounding and thrilling. Every touch felt like a brand, marking me as his in ways that went beyond any ring or contract. When he finally made me completely his, it was with a gentleness I hadn't expected from a man so dangerous. He watched my face, his own tight with control, murmuring words in Italian that sounded like prayers or promises. The brief pain gave way to something else, a connection that felt deeper than physical, more binding than any legal document. Afterward, I lay in his arms, my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. His fingers traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder, and in the peaceful silence, I felt something shift inside me. This was real now. Not just an arrangement or a desperate bargain, but something I couldn't quite name. Something that terrified and exhilarated me in equal measure. "I need to tell you something," Dante said quietly, his voice rumbling beneath my ear. "About why I agreed to Sophia's proposal. Why I really married you." I tensed slightly, afraid of what he might say, that it had all been manipulation? A way to control the situation with the boys? "I could have taken the boys back by force," he continued. "Could have made your life hell until you gave them up. But when I saw you through that peephole, standing there terrified but defiant, something changed. You weren't afraid for yourself. You were afraid for them. 2 children you didn't know, who meant nothing to you. But you were willing to risk everything to protect them." His hand cupped my face, tilting it up so I had to meet his eyes. "No one in my world does that, Emma. No one. We protect our own, our family. But strangers? We use them. We discard them. But you..." He shook his head, something like wonder in his expression. "You reminded me that there's still goodness in the world. Still people who do the right thing just because it's right. I'm not special," I whispered. You are special. To me." His thumb brushed my cheek. "I've done terrible things, Kara. Things that would make you run if you knew. I've hurt people, made choices that keep me awake at night. But with you, I want to be better. I want to be the man you see when you look at me." Tears burned behind my eyes. "Who do I see? Someone worth saving, even if I'm not sure I can be saved." I kissed him then, pouring everything I couldn't say into that kiss. And when he pulled me closer, holding me like I was something infinitely precious, I felt the last of my walls crumble. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the space beside me empty, but still warm. A note on the pillow read simply, "Had to leave early, back for lunch. D." I smiled, tracing the bold handwriting, then got up to check on Marco and Luca. They were already awake, eating breakfast in the kitchen with Mrs. Chen, who gave me a knowing smile that made my cheeks flush. "Papa's coming to visit next week," I told them, sitting down at the table. "Your real Papa. Antonio." Marco's face went through a series of emotions: hope, fear, uncertainty. "Will we have to go back with him?" "No. You're staying here with me. But he wants to see you, to know you're okay." I took his small hand. "Is that all right?" Luca nodded eagerly, but Marco was more cautious. "Will Mr. Moretti be there?" "Dante," I corrected gently. "And yes, probably. But he won't let anything bad happen, I promise." Over the following weeks, a new routine established itself. Antonio visited every Sunday, bringing gifts and apologies, slowly rebuilding trust with sons who barely remembered the father he'd been before desperation had driven him to steal. The visits were supervised at first, but gradually, as Antonio proved himself reliable, Dante allowed more freedom. Dante himself became less of an enigma and more of a partner. He still left early and came home late, still had that dangerous edge that made grown men nervous. But with me, he was different. Softer. He'd find me in the library with the boys and join us, listening to stories with a faint smile. He'd pull me into his office late at night, needing the comfort of my presence while he dealt with whatever darkness his business demanded. He'd wake me in the middle of the night with kisses that turned into something more, claiming me over and over until I knew every inch of his body as well as my own. I was falling in love with him. It was foolish and dangerous and probably inevitable, but there it was. This fierce, consuming feeling that grew stronger every day. 3 months after our wedding, everything came to a head. I was in the garden with Marco and Luca, watching them play soccer. Dante had hired a coach, insisting the boys needed physical activity. When Mrs. Chen appeared, her face pale. "Mrs. Moretti, Mr. Moretti needs you in his office. Immediately." The urgency in her voice made my stomach drop. I told the boys to stay with the coach, then hurried inside, my heart pounding. Dante's office door was open, and I could hear angry voices before I reached it. I paused in the doorway, taking in the scene. Dante stood behind his desk, his face carved from ice. Across from him were 3 men I didn't recognize, rough-looking, dangerous. And between them, on his knees with blood trickling from his mouth, was Antonio. "Emma." Dante's voice was sharp. "Come here." I moved to his side on shaking legs. Up close, I could see the fury in his eyes, tightly controlled but seething beneath the surface. "Tell her," Dante commanded Antonio. "Tell my wife what you've done." Antonio's face was a mask of shame and terror. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice." Dante's voice was cold enough to freeze blood. "You've been skimming, stealing again, from the legitimate accounts I trusted you with. How much this time?" 50,000. "But I can explain. Explain to me why I shouldn't put a bullet in your head right now." Dante's hand moved to the gun at his waist, and I gasped. "Dante, no." "Stay out of this, Emma." His eyes never left Antonio. "This is business." But I couldn't stay out of it. Not when Marco and Luca's father was about to die in front of me. "Please. Let me talk to him. Let me understand." "There's nothing to understand." Dante's control finally snapped, his voice rising. "He stole from me. Again. After I gave him a second chance. After I let him see his sons. After I trusted him. And this is how he repays me?" I turned to Antonio, searching his battered face. "Why? Why would you risk everything?" "My wife." His voice broke. "She's sick again. The cancer came back. The treatment. It cost so much, and I couldn't ask Dante, couldn't admit I'd failed again." "So you stole." Dante's voice was ice. "You always steal when things get hard. It's what you do." "I was going to pay it back. I swear, I just needed time? Another chance? How many chances do you think you deserve?" Dante pulled the gun, pointing it directly at Antonio's head, and my world narrowed to that single moment. "Stop!" I stepped between them, my hands raised. "Please, Dante, don't do this." His eyes locked on mine, blazing with fury. "Move, Emma." "No." My voice shook but held firm. "If you do this, those boys lose their father forever. And I lose you." Something flickered across his face. "What are you talking about?" "If you kill him, I'll never forgive you. Never." Tears streamed down my face. "I know he deserves punishment. I know he betrayed your trust, but killing him won't fix anything. It'll just make Marco and Luca orphans. It'll make you a murderer in their eyes." I moved closer, putting my hand on the gun. "Please. Be the man I know you can be, the man who showed mercy to those boys. The man who gave Antonio a chance in the first place." The silence stretched so long, I thought my heart might stop. Then slowly, Dante lowered the gun. "Get him out of my sight," he ordered his men. "Put him somewhere secure. I'll deal with this later." They dragged Antonio out, his relief palpable. When we were alone, Dante turned to me, his expression unreadable. "You had no right to interfere," he said quietly. "That was my decision to make. I'm your wife. That gives me the right to tell you when you're about to do something you'll regret." "Will I regret it?" His eyes searched mine. He's a thief, Emma. A repeated offender. In my world, that's a death sentence. Then change your world. I stepped closer, my hands on his chest. You have the power to do that, to show mercy, to be better than the violence you were raised with. He stared at me for a long moment, then pulled me against him, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. You're going to ruin me, he murmured into my hair. Turn me soft. No. I'm going to make you stronger. That night, after hours of tense phone calls and negotiations, Dante came to bed exhausted. He pulled me against him, his face buried in my neck. Antonio will work off the debt, he said quietly. All of it. It'll take 10 years, maybe more. He'll be monitored, controlled, given only enough money for his wife's treatment and basic living expenses. And he'll only see the boys under strict supervision. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me. I'm still angry, still want to put a bullet in him for betraying me again. His arms tightened around me, but you were right. Killing him would have destroyed something between us. And I can't lose you, Emma. I won't. I turned in his arms, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes that he rarely showed. You won't lose me. I'm not going anywhere. Promise me. His hand cupped my face. Promise me you'll stay, no matter what you learn about me, no matter what darkness you see. I promise. And I meant it with everything in me. 6 months later, everything had changed, and nothing had changed. I was no longer the invisible waitress counting pennies. I was Emma Moretti, wife to one of the most powerful men on the East Coast. I attended charity galas in designer gowns, hosted dinners for business associates, and learned to navigate the dangerous waters of Dante's world with increasing confidence. Marco and Luca thrived. Marco was excelling in his studies, and Luca's nightmares had finally stopped. They saw Antonio monthly, supervised visits where he brought books and stories, and slowly became a father again, rather than a desperate stranger. And Dante had become my everything, my husband, my lover, my partner in ways I'd never imagined possible. He still had that dangerous edge, still commanded rooms with his presence, but with me, he was vulnerable, real. He told me about his childhood, about the violence he'd witnessed, the choices he'd been forced to make. And I listened without judgment, understanding that he was a product of his world but choosing every day to be better than it demanded. On our 6-month anniversary, he took me to the same restaurant where he'd proposed our arrangement, but this time, there was no negotiation, no contract. I have something for you, he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a new ring, a stunning emerald surrounded by diamonds, far more elaborate than the simple wedding band I wore. You married me out of necessity, he said, sliding it onto my finger beside the first ring. This is because I choose you, because I love you, because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Tears blurred my vision. I love you too. So much it terrifies me. His smile was genuine, transforming his usually serious face. Good. Fear means you understand what we have, how rare it is, how worth protecting. He kissed me then, deep and possessive and full of promise. And as I kissed him back, I thought about the terrified waitress who'd sheltered 2 freezing boys, never imagining it would lead here, to love, to family, to a life beyond anything I'd dreamed possible. Take me home, I whispered against his lips. We are home, he murmured back. Wherever we are together, that's home. And as we left the restaurant, his hand warm in mine, I knew he was right. I'd found something I'd been searching for my entire life without knowing it. A place to belong, people to protect, and a love fierce enough to survive anything. The life of a mafia wife wasn't easy. There were still dangers lurking in shadows, still rivals who saw me as a weakness to exploit, still moments when Dante's world threatened to consume everything good we'd built. But we faced it together, bound by love stronger than any contract, protected by loyalty deeper than any law. Marco and Luca would grow up safe and loved, with 2 imperfect parents doing their best to give them the childhood they deserved. Antonio would slowly earn back his dignity, working honestly for the first time in years. And Dante and I would build a life, complicated and messy and sometimes frightening, but ours. That night, wrapped in Dante's arms in our bed, I thought about the moment everything changed. A cold Tuesday night, 2 frightened boys, and a choice that had seemed so simple at the time. To show kindness when cruelty was easier. It had cost me everything I'd known, and given me everything I'd never dared to hope for. "What are you thinking?" Dante murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my bare shoulder. "That I'd do it all again," I said. "Every choice, every risk, it all led here, to you." His arms tightened around me, then we're both lucky. Because I'd move heaven and earth to find my way back to you. Outside, snow began to fall. The first of winter. But inside our home, wrapped in the warmth of the life we'd built, and the love we'd fought for, I'd never felt safer. This was my happy ending. Not perfect. Never simple, but real and hard-won and absolutely perfectly mine.